Meanwhile, just a couple of house rules before we start. So first of all, we kindly ask all of you to mute yourselves so that we don't have any background noise. Also, as you have already seen, we are recording the session for everyone who could not attend today to be able to watch the webinar afterwards. So in case you would not like to be seen in the recording, please make sure to turn off your camera. And I also kindly ask you to pose any questions during the webinar at any time during the chat, please. So we will have a 1-hour session, and during the webinar you will have the time to put all your questions into the chat, and the colleagues from our partner university Côte d'Azur will be happy to answer your questions, or anyone else from the Ulysseus team. So while the colleagues are uploading the presentation, I would like to say a few welcoming words. So my name is Sarah Repo from NCI, the Entrepreneurial School in Innsbruck, in Austria, and I would very much like to welcome you to this webinar session. This is organized by our partner university, the University of Côte d'Azur, in the framework of the Ulysseus European University Alliance, which is basically a strategic university network funded by the European Commission, and is consisting of 8 European partner universities. So MCI in Innsbruck is part of this alliance. The University of Côte d'Azur, the University of Seville in Spain is another partner. Also the University of Genova in Italy, the Technical University of Košice in Slovakia, the Haga Helia University of Applied Sciences in Finland, and our 2 new members since 2023, the University of Münster in Germany and the University of Montenegro. So today we would like to introduce you to basically an innovative pedagogical methodology, which is called COIL. COIL stands for Collaborative Online International Learning, which is currently a very hot topic, I would say, in the higher education and internationalization sector. So if maybe you have heard of it before, perhaps you have also engaged in a COIL before, maybe this is the opportunity for you also to find out more about COILs, about best practices and practical tips. So in this session today, you will be able to find out what a COIL is exactly, and also how you can use this tool to internationalize your course, your academic course at home with your students, and how you can actually connect your classroom virtually with the classroom of another Ulysseus partner university. Okay, in this case, I may hand over to my colleague from the University of Côte d'Azur, Chandan Atreya, who is the head of division in the Department of International Development and European Projects at the University of Côte d'Azur in Nice. Okay, please go ahead.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction, Sarah, and a very warm and sunny welcome to you all from Nice. I'm very glad that you could join us in this sort of very short webinar and giving you an idea about what COIL, or Collaborative Online International Learning, is all about. And again, I'm also joined by my colleagues here, Virginie, Odo, and Pauline. And if there are any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat, and we will obviously get back to you. And without wasting much time, let's begin. I just have a very quick question. I want to just check if the slides move as my screen changes. So if you could please confirm that. Are we all on slide 2 with Ulysseus? So as you all know, we are part of the Ulysseus European University, and I'm glad that we are all here. The presentation, we've just decided to break down the agenda quite simply. We will give you an introduction to what COIL is. Hopefully, we will understand what COIL leads to, certain strategies on how you can implement COIL within your institutions, what are the benefits and challenges. We will give you an actual example of a COIL that has already happened within the Ulysseus network. Then, of course, we will try and explain how and where you could start it, what exactly is the Ulysseus Seed Fund initiative, and of course, the contact details of your local officers, so that when you're all extremely enthused about having or running COIL in your institutions, you could reach out to them. So the reason why, so I just wanted to give you a brief context on why COIL or what COIL is. So as we all know that as higher education institutions or universities, internationalization is a very important and a vital part of how we run our day-to-day operations. But then, however, we also need to understand that internationalization abroad for all is a very huge challenge. Now, across the entire Ulysseus network, we know we have a little over 225,000 students, which is a very large number. And I don't know how practically or feasibly it is possible to ensure that we have internationalization for all. Now, what we also understand from the past is that unfortunately, the internationalization component, when I talk about internationalization, physical internationalization is restricted, unfortunately, to a very small group of students and staff. And the need for the hour is to ensure that internationalization for all members, for all participants within the higher education community. So one of the challenges and one of the initiatives which we all talk about is internationalization at home. Now, what exactly is internationalization at home is to ensure that people staying within their host institutions can still have an idea about what intercultural and international competencies are all about. And for this, to ensure that this goes on, we have initiatives such as virtual exchanges, which becomes a very vital cornerstone for the internationalization at home activities. And COIL is an example of one such virtual exchange. So if I move to the next slide, virtual exchanges have already existed, as in how technology has changed. We are all digitally connected. We are all connected through our devices. So we've all participated in some form of virtual exchange or the other. What we're doing right now, for example, is an online intercultural exchange. There are telecollaborations. There are multiple ways with multiple formulations and multiple definitions. And in that, one of the main, which we are going to talk about today, is collaborative online international learning, or COIL. Moving to the next slide, why COIL works within your institution is that it allows you to have equity. So that is the one that we are all very concerned with. Like I explained in my previous slide, internationalization abroad unfortunately means that there is a very small percentage of the community that can experience it, but then the rest of them usually do not have that option. COIL allows you to have global learning, because that is what we finally want our students to be, globally competent. It allows for an intercultural sort of engagement, intercultural activities and competence, which we hope to benefit across the student and the staff community. Importantly, it allows for diversity and inclusion. There are new skills that we all need to learn, so COIL gives you an opportunity to do that. Like all things, it is a student-centered learning. It is for our students, who are obviously our most important stakeholders. There are new methods to employ pedagogical tools, so which helps and benefits our teachers. It has high impact. And of course, the most important thing for a lot of our partners and across the network is that it's quite cost-effective and it is scalable. So you can use multiple examples within your university itself. So again, just to give you an idea about what we want to help you with this particular webinar, is to allow you to understand what is a COIL, how exactly do you structure one, if possible, share some sort of tips or best practices to ensure that you can implement it most efficiently. And the important point is on how to start a COIL, and that's part of the Ulysseus initiative as well. So the first thing that a lot of people ask is that, oh, is this a new thing now that we need to add on to our existing curricula? It's not. COIL is not a new course. It's not a new program. It's not a new sort of way to add on more work. It is a new tool or a new methodology to deliver on your existing course as a teacher or as an educator. So I just want you to slightly shift your thinking into saying that I'm not adding on more work to you. It is more about how do I make it a bit more efficient or add a different paradigm of thinking into how you deliver your programs. The COIL, like all things, is all about finding the right overlap. It's a bit like, in a very weird way, sort of like dating. You need to understand what your course is about. Once you find a partner, what their course is about. And then again, because this is an internationalization at home initiative, you also need to identify what is the international perspective within your course. And the overlap between these three different components is what is known as a COIL collaboration, or that is what you will hopefully arrive at as a COIL collaboration. Again, now, COIL can be defined in multiple ways. So there are multiple sort of ways of understanding how a COIL is. So at the core, like I said, COIL is an innovative method of teaching and learning. So it's not something, like a new course, a new way to deliver on your course. This will leverage online technologies because that is the fundamental sort of stepping stone on how you will achieve to deliver global learning and cross-cultural experiences. So your students, as well as your teaching staff, can benefit from interacting with someone else with a different perspective on either the same program or a different program. COIL is also an innovative pedagogical method that allows for collaborative teaching and learning. Now, this is important for our teaching staff between two or more countries so that you can understand how a different population approaches the same subject or how your points of view might differ. And of course, there's online communication. And this is a teacher-led program. So this can happen in any way, any imaginative way that the teachers and also the students to a certain extent want to progress in ensuring that the COIL is a successful engagement. It is an academic content lesson. So for example, it is not about a random sort of topic. It is your core of expertise mixed with someone else's. But then it allows for cross-cultural communication and collaboration because this becomes very important for students to understand. And you can add it as a course module, or it can be an entire course within itself. That sort of imagination is left to whatever is feasible between you and your partners. A COIL's principle. Now, again, I go back to the fact that we want internationalization for all. So therefore, a COIL collaboration has to be equitable and it has to be inclusive. Now, when I say equitable and inclusive, it means that you also understand the sort of limitations that your partner cohort might or might not have, the sort of methodologies in how they approach towards, say, technological communication in the way that they do their pedagogy, etc. So this will allow you to engage with them at an equal footing. Because this is obviously directed to help our students to become, more global citizens in a way. So COIL is to allow students to give, is designed to allow students to have meaningful learning opportunities. And this happens when they interact with other students from other countries, other cultures, other geographies, through shared activities and discussions, because that's how they finally learn. It is very important that the stakeholders, that is the teachers and the students, are very, very clear about why they are doing this particular activity. So the purpose and the requirements have to be very well charted out. And also it has to, you have to see the benefit of things, right? So why exactly are you investing your time, your efforts, in engaging with, different people? So what exactly is the course's learning objective? And the most important component that we've seen whenever people engage in COIL is not so much in the activities that they do. That, of course, is the backbone of everything. But then it's the reflection activity that actually allows students as well as teachers to actually understand, what did I learn when I spoke to somebody else? What did I achieve? What new thing, or how did my thinking change when I work with another set of people across the globe? So it's this reflection activity that is also a fundamental component of the COIL principles. Again, so more sort of to break it down into more granular sort of levels, COIL actually can be created in any discipline. So, you could have English teachers talking to English teachers, economics teachers talking to economics teachers. But then there are global examples of how interdisciplinary collaborations have also worked very well. For example, there have been cases where architecture students spoke to art history students to develop new programs, which was a very interesting sort of way to do things, in my opinion. It encourages active student learning and teamwork. Now, this is something that will serve for everyone. You need to learn, but then also you need to learn to work collaboratively. These are not just, let's just attend and see what happens. So there is a grade. So this requires active engagement in each participating class. Now, this takes a bit of time to understand, but then these are actually asynchronous activities with some synchronous activities. Now, in the past, I know that we are more used to actually running synchronous activities, but then you would have to understand that you are dealing with cohorts or partners who might not share the same sort of timelines as us. So it becomes very, very important that there are methodologies that students develop among themselves as well as the teachers for asynchronous catch-ups rather than relying completely on synchronous activities. Because we're talking internationalization, there is a very strong emphasis on cross-cultural interactions and understanding to say that, if I'm a student sitting in Finland from Hagahelia, how does a student in Genoa look at, say, architecture? How do they look at, say, science and technology? What are the challenges that we would like to answer? And we are very, very democratic in the COIL utility. So you can use any technology tool that will help serve your learning goals. But then, of course, when you use a technology tool, it has to be an agreed upon understanding. So, it can't be that I use WhatsApp and somebody else uses Teams. So the thing is, you're not limited to what platform you would like to use, but then it has to be definitely agreed upon between the partner cohorts. Now, there are certain strategies that people use for successful COIL implementation. One is that, it's an innovative, like I said, it's an innovative pedagogical tool. So you as teachers or students have all the sort of freedom to, develop and use your creativity to design a particular COIL program. What would be the activities? What are the deliverables? How often you would like to meet up? How you would like to meet up? All of these depend on, your freedom of thought, and you can use them however you would like. Because one of the principles that I spoke about earlier said that COIL is all about equity. So the technology that you decide to use must be accessible to everyone within the COIL cohort. The technology that you're using should help to share, to arrive at the shared learning objectives that you would like to reach at. Some other work that has happened and which works really well is to develop the icebreaker activities. Now, there are multiple examples that we've seen, across the world where it's this icebreaker activity that investing a bit more time in ensuring that the students get to know each other a little better, rather than just have an initial saying, oh, hello, I'm from, Montenegro, and, I'm working with MCI students. If you can allow for students to actually develop some sort of communication ties so that they know there's a sense of familiarity, this actually helps them to be more efficient in arriving at the shared activities that need to be done. You also must be very aware that a COIL program is not sitting in a silo. It will evolve as your students will, present new perspectives. Your teachers will say, actually, this could have worked better if we had done something else. So you need not stick to say, this is the course, that's it, we will not change. A COIL course always evolves. And of course, why are we doing this? Because this is for teaching and learning. So how do these activities actually advance the objectives of the course? Now, if you're looking at an interdisciplinary program to say, develop a video, so each of these activities must help the student to ensure that they understand that, okay, these are the components for, say, editing. These are how, frames are held. the editing components or the creativity components. So all of your activities must have an end goal towards advancing the course that your students are already studying. So again, just to sum it up very quickly, so a COIL can be successful if you're using the same or related disciplines, but then we know that interdisciplinary pairings sometimes create very beautiful sort of expressions. It also creates long-lasting collaborations between students as well as teachers. And then again, the way to ensure that you have engagement happens when you have interactive and, more importantly, intercultural activities. Because remember, why do we do mobility? So that our students and staff can, immerse themselves in understanding how a different culture works. Now, we're trying to do the same thing in a slightly different way when all of the participants are sitting in the comforts of their home or their home countries. But then we would still like to promote the fact that this is an intercultural sort of engagement that's going on. So this is something that you will obviously need to keep very much in your mind when you design a program. So the thing is, how do these COIL programs benefit students as well as staff? Now, skills and knowledge are a given because these are course programs. However, the changes that you see in influencing behaviors and attitudes are, in my personal opinion, actually the bigger wins that you get. Yes, of course, you share knowledge, you understand, you develop new projects, skills come up, but then if you can sensitize a student about, that some problems are actually shared problems, regardless of where you sit in the world, some problems which we take for granted in a certain country might actually be, a real threat in a way. So it allows students and, staff, of course, to be more sensitized to how people approach challenges, how do they think, what are the methodologies, how do you share best practices, therefore ensuring that our Ulysseus students are actually global citizens for the world. The challenges, of course, never end. A COIL challenge, like I said, requires teachers, requires engagement. So, of course, the biggest ask that we have of participants is their time. It takes time to actually develop the program. It takes time to agree upon, decisions to say this is how we are going to achieve it. Language. Of course, I don't speak Finnish, for example. So if I went to Hagaheli, I would very much rely on my English. Culture, of course, is a challenge, and also, in my opinion, a good way to learn because you are, exposed to different ways of thought and operations. Content. Now, you obviously have to arrive at this. It takes a while. Sometimes not everyone is on board, so it takes a bit of negotiation, a bit of give and take. Assessment is a challenge because remember, these are graded activities. You don't do this just for the heck of doing it. So how do you assess? There could be differences in opinion. Technology, it is a subjective matter in some cases. Some people may be more comfortable on a certain platform than others. Sometimes it's a question of bandwidth. Sometimes there could be brownouts, blackouts, depending on which geography you're working with. So you will need to keep this in mind. How does it work within your institution? Like, is this something that your host organization supports? Are they fine with saying that, yes, physical mobility is difficult for everyone? Or are they going to be, no, we will try to do however it works? What are your expectations? Does it kind of align with your partner's expectations? And more importantly, does it align with the expectations that your host organizations have? And what kind of support do you get? Do your teaching staff, do your colleagues help you? Are your students supportive of this initiative? All of these are very important challenges to keep in mind, but I'm sure everything can be managed through negotiation and through having a very clear sort of an objective in mind. Now, rather than give you speculative examples, we thought it was simpler if you gave you an actual example of how a COIL has already happened. So I would like to present to you all Zena Marshall, who's a teacher of English for the economics and undergraduate, for the economics program at University of Kodazio. She's also a member of the academic advisory board. And if Zena is available, I could yield the floor to her.
Hello, Chandan. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
thank you. There was a tentative yes there. I'm down as Bianca, but I think there's so many Biancas here because of the link we followed. Thanks for that clear outline of what a COIL is. So I'm going to tell you about a project that I have developed with two colleagues in Košice. I see that there's some people from Košice here today. And this project started 2 years ago, back in 2022, and it started purely because of an Erasmus Plus teacher mobility, where Eva and Henrietta came to Nice to share some best practice. So I'm going to tell you like how this project evolved, where it came from. I'm going to give you some numbers and how the student participation has changed over the last 2 years. We've run 2 full semesters, and we're now planning for the 3rd semester of this project. And then look at some of the possible problems and solutions. And I'm going to ask you as well to kind of join in a little bit and predict some problems, or perhaps you've already run some projects like this. You could add some problems and solutions that you have found yourself. But I think my overall message is that it's quite easy to set up. I say that tentatively because there are obviously things that can happen, but for us at least, it did kind of happen quite intuitively, I would say, actually, because when I started this project, we weren't really thinking COIL. I'm not entirely sure if I'd even heard the word COIL when we started it. So let's have a look at what we did. Chandan, am I in charge of the slide, or are you going to change it for me?
I can change it for you if you want, Zena.
Or can I do it as well myself? I don't know if I'm... Nothing's happening.
I don't think it's happening, so I'll do it for you. You can just tell me and I'll move the next slide.
Sure, let's move on to the next slide. Thanks.
Perfect.
So, like I said, this started when Ava and Henrietta arrived in Nice in the summer of 2022, and we were just going to share some best practice. We didn't have much information about their visit before they arrived, but when they arrived, we had, and I say we because I was also with my other colleague in the English for Economics department, Catherine May. And we really felt an affinity with these teachers coming in. We had a lot in common and we hit it off well. And I think that is key really to when you're doing these projects, is that you have a really good understanding with the teachers that you're working with. And as long as you have that, things kind of happen. So let's move to the next slide. Actually, yeah, it's kind of one by, yeah, that's great. So we started in September 2022 with 91 students in total. So that was 48 students in Nice. These were my students. So I had 2 groups and 43 students in Košice. Now, one of the problems we found was that the students in Nice had a lower level of English generally, and the way it worked better for us after some discussion was that our 3rd year undergraduate students would be working with Košice's 2nd year undergraduate students. So we did have to kind of find the sweet spot of who would be best working with who. 3 teachers, so that was me in Nice, and then 2 in Košice, Henrietta and Ava. They had 1 group of students each. The next point, please. There were 20 international teams. So we set up the students into teams of 3 to 4 students each. We tried to have 2 students from Nice with 2 students from Košice, obviously, so that you have like a friend from your home university. But 1 or 2 students did drop out or leave the program. So we did end up with a couple of 3 student teams. But it really was international because one of the teams was actually composed of 4 different nationalities. So what Chandan was saying about global citizenship and using the culture that you had really did come into play, particularly with the team there with 4 different nationalities. Next point. Thanks. So then this was the second year we ran it. We enlarged the program because it was quite successful, we thought. So we opened it up. We had 174 students. That's 73 in Nice with 106 in Košice. Now, the reason it was imbalanced was because Košice wanted all of their students to do this international project. We have a lot more students. So I was working only with 4 groups that I was teaching, but we are looking at ways now of introducing it to the whole of our 3rd year program. So it kind of like a step-by-step way of working out numbers, how it's going to fit into your program, etc. So if I could have the next point, this was still the same 3 teachers. And the next point is the number of teams. So we now had 37 international teams, again, of 3 to 4 students. Next, there we go. So this time we had 2 students from University Côte d'Azur and 3 students from CHUK. Again, some of them changed during the program. So we really did increase the team numbers, and it didn't really add too much extra work, I would say, having the larger numbers. I'll show you what the project was in a moment. Next slide, please. So here are our objectives. And just before I go through the objectives, I'll let you read them, actually. Give you a moment. So the idea for this project had come out of a master's thesis I'd written a few years previous about motivation to study English in the French higher education system, because I had come across a surprising, for me, lack of motivation in the French higher education system. And I wanted to kind of understand where this lack of motivation came from. And one of the things I focused on was that there was a lack of real life use of English. And I wanted to develop a project where the students were not just learning English, but they were using the English to do what they had chosen to study. So they were all studying economics and management, but they were just using English to get this project done. And that's when I met Ava and Henrietta, I proposed this project because they were also teaching English to economics and management students. We had quite a lot of similarities in our programs, and we thought the objectives were kind of similar for both sides, to be able to really use their English. Next slide, please. So what we did is we had the teams do 3 progressively complex tasks. As Chandan said in the first, in his description, the ice-breaking part, the getting to know you part, really is important. And originally we gave them 1 week to do that, and actually we've extended that to 2 weeks, and possibly even more, because it is such an important part. The final task was a graded video presentation with obligatory screen presence, which we had to discuss a lot because of data protection, etc., etc. But we decided to have them on screen so that we can actually grade them and check them against their university photographs. So my students talked about their progress each week. This is going back to what Chandan said about the reflexive part of COILs. And we had a collaborative problem-solving approach. Our students in Nice only had 7 sessions. We have a lot fewer hours of English than they do in Košice. So we had 7 sessions, and each session we would dedicate a little bit part of the lesson to the project reflection. How's it going? And we did that in different ways. Sometimes it was oral in a circle. Sometimes it was written. Sometimes it was in small groups. Every week, the teachers met for about 1 hour. So that was from sort of September to December, once a week, apart from maybe a break in the middle for a holiday. And feedback and ideas were collected as the project developed. So we really were doing this. We decided to, I think we started the project within about a week or maximum 2 weeks of agreeing that we would do the project. We said, okay, let's just do it. Let's just set it up and see how it goes. So it really was kind of fast to set up, but we saw how it evolved. And talking about the assessment part of it, we agreed that the home teachers would grade their own students. So we had agreed an assessed a criteria for each of the teams, but the home teachers still graded their students so that it would fit into the grading system of each university. And it does work. So far, we've found that grading system is kind of fair for both universities. So the tasks themselves, in the first edition in 2022, was the kind of icebreaker get to know you, was to make contact and get to know your international team, and to create a team name to represent your interests. So this was just meet. When I say just, this is actually probably the hardest part of the task, was to meet, to set up a WhatsApp or an Instagram. They had their emails. We gave the teams email addresses, and from that, they had to choose whether they were going to use WhatsApp, Instagram, Zoom, Teams, etc. to meet. Task 2 then was to discuss what it takes to become an entrepreneur and analyze your own skills, so each person in the team, and then they created team profiles for the skills that each person had in that team. And task 3 was the final task, was to create a startup to improve the sustainability of university life. And this was a pitch for investment. In the first year, we actually had a second task, which because we didn't just want, a lot of our students are interested in entrepreneurship, but not all of them. So we wanted to give teams a choice, and that was to research regulations and guidelines for setting up a startup in the EU. So they were comparing France and Slovakia. And then they had to give a video presentation to advise students. In the second year, we changed that one. And that was because with artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, we felt it was too easy to just get artificial intelligence to do that for you. So that one was cut out in the second edition. Next slide, please. So here's just a little glimpse of our final project. So they were allowed to use any video tool they wanted. Some of them, I think the one on the left is a PowerPoint with video inserted into the PowerPoint. And the other 2 are Zooms, different ways of recording the Zoom with a PowerPoint, and the third one, I don't think they had a whole, they didn't have to have a PowerPoint. They could do it in any way they like. So the last 4 all on the screen together. So that's what they look like at the end. With what they got from the project, at the end of the project, we gave an exit email trying to help them link this project to their CV so that they could see what they got. This was a bit tricky to organize, again, because of the timing, as Chandan mentioned, because my classes had already finished. That's why my students got an email. In Slovakia, they still had classes, so I think they were able to do it perhaps more in class. But this idea of developing your skills for your CV and adding something, get a real benefit for their CV. So any ideas? I've been through that quite quickly. I'm not sure if maybe you have some questions of how it worked, but problems and solutions. I mentioned one or two. We don't have the same amount of students. That's the organization of teams, different groups, kind of negotiating that. Our students have different levels of English, and teams don't gel or get on well. These were some of the problems we had in the chat box. Can I see the chat box? Are there any other problems? Can we go back a slide? Are there any problems that you think, I might do this, but I'd be happy to hear those problems in the chat.
Zena, we actually have a dedicated slot for questions, so probably they could ask you towards the end of the presentation.
Okay, all right, no problem. So we did have some big problems, particularly with one team who just did not gel. They had terrible problems. In the reflective sessions in my class, I heard all kinds of things about the other team not wanting to work, and they did this and they did this, and it was like, whoa, I wasn't quite prepared for so much. So one thing we did was to create a team contract that teams could use, that they sign, and they agree, for example, how long it's going to take them to answer WhatsApp messages, or how much time they can devote, etc., etc. So we, as the problems came up, we tried to solve it with the students and with my partner teachers. And what I found, if we can move on to the next slide, the team who had the biggest problems, who really, at the beginning, I thought this is not going to work at all, were actually a great team at the end. And if you can see at the end of their project video, they included this slide of how great it was to work with you. Good job, team. Nice to meet you guys. So that's just kind of like a success story of one of the big problems we had, that the team managed to work it out through a bit of reflection and this team contract. And go on to the next slide. There's also some reflexive comments. These were comments at the end, reflexive. My students had to do some reflexive writing at the end, and these are one or two of the comments. I'll just give you a minute to look at those. Oh, I see. You can see that one of the comments, it was complicated to organize Zooms with our team because we don't have the same availability. The biggest problem, as somebody has said in the chat, how did they manage with their very busy course schedules? This is the biggest problem for them, finding time. But time management is project management skills is one of the objectives that we are trying to develop here. So we talked about this each week. We discussed tools they can use. For example, things like I forgot what it's called. Doodle. Is it called Doodle? Or the Evento, where you can organize team meetings, etc. So we discussed different tools that could help them, or different techniques that could help them. And there was a lot of students helping students. So students who were not having a problem were telling the other teams how they did it, which was great. And I think we've got one more slide. So this is coming up for our third edition, just to see how it is evolving over the time. So we are hopefully going to start in September with the University of Montenegro, to have 3, maybe more universities. If anybody else is interested, who knows, we could add people in. What's interesting with the University of Montenegro is our partner teacher there is a professor of economics. So we are really focusing now on not just it being an English course, but the sort of more interdisciplinary will provide the English support, and we're going to have the more economic background coming in as well. We also tried to add in this year, the task became a competition judged by entrepreneurial experts from the Innovation Fund of Montenegro, which was a fantastic opportunity for our students to get some real feedback, not just on their international communication skills, which we were giving them, but also from the entrepreneurial experts. So we had this year, took a bit of organizing, but a mobility prize for the top 3 projects. And we're hoping to develop that for next year. Not completely necessary for COIL projects, as we have talked about it being equity for all people to be able to get international experience even without physical mobility. But just the fact that it is has become a competition because it is a startup project is why we have that. We are also doing some research. I'm doing some research now with Dr. Tabitha Newman, and we're collecting data on digital and remote teamwork. And this is important, as Chandan said, about making sure that everyone has access to the same tools, making sure that nobody is left out with areas like using Teams, for example, or Zoom. We had one of these problems where my students were using Zoom and Chuk were using Teams, and there had to be a little bit of discussion about what they were going to use. But in some places it could also be Wi-Fi issues, etc., time issues, etc. And so this is now, we're looking at what data we need to collect in order to improve these projects. And we will be presenting that in Digital Week in June, which Chandan is also running. I think I might have gone over my time, but thanks, Chandan. I'll can go on to the questions at the end.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Zena. So just to quickly wrap up, I hope that all of you are very sensitized that the example that Zena gave, particularly with her work with 2K in Slovakia, kind of implements all the different strategies and components of a COIL program. So of course, you need to be creative. It gave you an example about how technology is utilized for all students, that it supports their learning objectives. So they could finally work together to work on their CVs, improve their language skills, improve their collaborative skills, develop teamwork. The icebreaker time was good, and of course the program evolved. Now, based on that example, you obviously would be asking now, where and how do I start? So some of the questions that you need to keep in mind, definitely for yourself, is that, do you think that the program or the course that you're teaching, would it be a good candidate for a COIL experience? Basically, is there a strong international component? Are you, as an educator or a teacher, ready to teach your course which has enhancement or modifications which technology will bring in? Most important question, does your institution support this initiative? Are they fine in you experimenting? And then the next most important question, do you already know someone within the pool, within the Ulysseus network or other networks, who would like to partner with you on this initiative? And if you don't, then what would be the key criteria that you have in your mind to select a particular partner? So these generally form the basis of the first step towards your COIL journey. So, we have the resources that are open. So, it's open for you all. You can just click on the link or use the QR codes. And, you could then do your own research, find out more ideas on what you would like to do from a COIL perspective. And now I think I should leave it to Sarah and Bianca to explain more about the Seed Fund initiative.
Yes, thank you very much, Shandan, and thank you, Zena, for this really, really interesting best practice example. So I see we have a lot of questions in the chat that we will come to very, very soon. Just one more information from my side. Within the Ulysseus European University, we are currently now piloting a so-called seed fund initiative for teachers of the 8 Ulysseus partner universities. So currently, all the universities have internally published a call where we invite teaching staff to co-create a COIL, basically, to create these learning opportunities within their courses in virtual space for their students. And the seed funding that the teachers may apply for is basically a financial support to co-create a COIL together with one or more Ulysseus partners. Basically, with this seed funding, it's a maximum of 2,500 euros. You will be able to travel to the partner and to connect in person and to plan and co-create the COIL. The criteria, of course, is, since this should be a collaborative approach, is that minimum 2 lecturers from 2 different Ulysseus partner universities should be involved. So minimum 2 lecturers, minimum 2 Ulysseus partner universities. The application deadline is set for the 15th of May. We have the QR code to the Ulysseus webpage, where you can find out all the details of the call and the criteria and the requirements, and where you also have the application form. Since this is a pilot, we are fully aware that not all the teachers are yet fully connected within Ulysseus. So we strongly encourage those teachers who already know someone at a partner university through maybe a joint project or a double degree to hand in a proposal together. And to those who are still looking for a partner, maybe Shandan, you can show the next slide. You can contact your local Ulysseus mobility officer. They have made basically an Excel sheet where they are collecting interested proposals. And as the May deadline is, of course, approaching, no worries about that. We will have several of these seed funding calls within Ulysseus, a minimum of 4 of these seed funding. So you can also already start brainstorming ideas for the next seed funding call. But now I leave the floor to the questions. I see that there are a couple of ones which are directed to Zena. So Zena, if I may ask you, there was a very specific question about the learning platform you were using. Was that Moodle or something else?
So from my side with my students, I was actually using OneNote, and I think I'm not entirely sure what Ava and Henrietta were using. Were they using Moodle? But we didn't link our students together on any platform. They had to do it themselves. We allowed them to choose whatever they wanted. So our students had Zoom from the University Côte d'Azur, but they don't have access to Teams. The students in Košice had access to Teams. So it depends who was setting up the meeting and what they were doing. We really allowed them to choose. What I'm researching now is looking more at the tools they're using and perhaps putting more focus on project management tools, and hoping to get students more familiar with more of a variety of project management tools, which they can then use on their CV and in their future professional life.
Great, that's very interesting. Thank you for that tip. The next two questions are more related, I would say, to student perception and motivation. So, how did the students manage to organize themselves for the task? How did they manage with their very busy courses and schedules? And how could you ensure or support help that all students were participating in the project work regularly?
Well, so we had weekly meetings, like I said, a sort of reflexive meeting, how's it going? And sometimes they were in a round table, open circle in class. Sometimes I went round to each team. Sometimes they had to write so I could see what was going on. And the teams kind of self-regulated because they would say, you know, like, oh, we haven't met this week because they had exams, or the other team is, they haven't, this is when the problems came up. The other team are not answering us, et cetera, et cetera. So each week I was kind of checking in with my teams. In Košice, they were doing the same. And then when we met, the teachers met once a week, we would go through, we'd have a list of, okay, no problems with teams 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 has a problem. Oh, yes. Okay, this is because da da da. And then we would discuss how to help that team in with whatever problem they were having. For example, with the team contract, or by contacting them and saying what's happening. You know, actually one student had dropped out of the course, so then we followed up with them and said, okay, now you're only a team of 3, that kind of thing. So it was that's the time consuming part of it, really, is the communication between the students, but also with the teachers to see how it's going. But out of the, I mean, this year, 37 teams. To be honest, there's not that many problems. Most of the teams get on with it, and they kind of it works somehow amazingly. So it's not you're not like having to follow up 37 teams. It's only a few that have the problem.
That's soothing to hear. That's great. But we learn follow up is important. Thank you. And how about the intercultural aspect? Did you experience that the COIL somehow also changed the students' attitudes or possible prejudice towards others?
From the reflective writing that I saw, I didn't. I mean, it is true that they knew I was going to read it, so bearing that in mind, they might not say how terrible it was. But towards the end, at the beginning of the course, they were quite open about how terrible things were when it was terrible, some of the teams. So I felt like by the time we got to the end of the course, they would probably be the same kind of, they would have the same open and honestness. And it really was a lot better at the end than at the beginning. I mean, there was interesting things about when they had exams, different exam times. So they had okay, we've got exams this week. I said, well, okay, are you talking about your exams? Have you put together like when you have these exams so that oh, that would be a good idea. Okay. So that kind of thing, because it doesn't happen at the same time in the semester, was useful. I think we could, this coming third edition, we are going to do a bit more input, and we're planning on each university is going to do a hybrid workshop, either asynchronous or synchronous. So if the timing works out, people can come to it like this workshop. Otherwise, it would be recorded. And we're going to have one on intercultural communication, one on language for collaboration, and one on a more economic topic. We haven't 100% got those down yet, but that kind of more input this year, I think, will help from the intercultural perspective and get them thinking about it a bit more. But I think what I'd really like to say from my experience is you can do it without thinking too much in advance, because you're learning with the students. And I think that as long as you're open with the students to say, okay, we're going to try this as an experiment. You know, we've never done this before. The other thing was that in my course, we had a project anyway. The project was working in teams of 4, and they did have to create a startup, and it was more or less the same. However, they were just working with 4 students here in Nice. And so obviously pretty much everything they did was in French, and then their final project was in English. So this was, it fitted into the syllabus in exactly the same way. There's a question there about grading, wasn't
Yes,
there?
the grading. I think that is a topic that is probably also interesting many. So as I think
And
usually in COILs, you would grade your own students, right, from your own university. But of course, the interesting question is, did any of the teams fail as such this course? And how did you organize retakes? Yes.
So the project was from memory, I think it was 30% of their semester, or was it 40%? 40% maximum of their semester grade. So both our university and Košice had other elements of the evaluation. So this was 40% of their evaluation. I think one team failed to hand in a video, so they didn't get the grade for the video. But as it was only 40% or 30%, I think it was 30%, there were other elements. So it wasn't like pass or fail the whole semester on this one project.
I see. Great. Thanks for elaborating on that. I think we have maybe one more minute because we have 2 still very interesting questions in the chat left. So one is related to the input sessions. Did these include hybrid elements, or was everything completely online?
So yeah, so this coming year we are going to have some hybrid elements, and they are going to be, we're going to have more input. Mostly the way it's run so far is we do the reflective part. We set up in class, so we say this is what's going to happen, this is what you're going to do, here's the instructions, and we check that they've understood the instructions. Which I'm happy to share if anybody wants to see the instructions the students get. I could put that in the chat. So we go through the instructions. Then they go off and they do it. You know, they however they're going to do WhatsApp, Zoom, chat, and then it's the reflective part each week that we check in with them. So online present, was it completely online? So it was completely online in their teams. And to be honest, you know, the teachers, in their teams, we only saw the final video. We didn't see them working together. We just heard about them working together through reflective writing or through speaking in class. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I believe so. Great. And I see we have one more question, which will maybe still, if you still have a minute, Senna, then we could still take these 2 questions. So I think one crucial question is also, what is really the main success factor for COILs as a collaborative project? Because in universities already, you know, students are happy, you know, with real world simulations, with projects, applied group work as such. So is the COIL needed in addition, or is the COIL the major game changer?
I think Chandan said in his talk about global citizenship, global competencies, and I think that's the key part of a COIL, because whether or not I'm coming at it from an English language perspective, although to be honest, I'm really more interested in the interdisciplinary approach where English is just the communication structure, and if we could get students really working on these global projects together to solve global problems, this is for things like sustainability. I mean, this is the future, I would say. So a COIL really does give students a taste for the competencies they need to work in these kind of environments. And I think that's the key point, is I I mean, it looks great on their CV, but it really helped them with this self-reflection of, okay, I didn't think I could do this, but actually I just created a project with some people I've never met in a different country. And I think what came out at the end was the incredible self-satisfaction of the students when they had done this project. Because at the beginning, I think there was a slide missing actually on my PowerPoint, but at the beginning we did a word cloud of how are you feeling about doing this project. And what was interesting was there was a complete divide between a lot of words like excited, amazing, great, so it's so interesting, and other ones which were like terrifying, or like nervous, anxiety. But there was nobody in the middle saying, well, as they say in France, nobody had. It was a really powerful sort of one or the other, and by the end of it they did it, and I think they were so pleased with themselves for having done that, and that's the skills they will need in these kind of international projects in the future.
Fantastic. That sounds rewarding for the students, but I suppose also for the teacher, for the lecturer, in order to be able to create this setting for the students. And this brings me also to my next to the next question. So Guillaume is asking, apart from the seed funding call for teachers, which is, as you say correctly, Guillaume, this is a starting point. This is kicking off, the COILs, piloting them, getting things started, getting teachers within Ulysseus to connect, to get to know each other, to work with each other. Are there any more sustainable financial support mechanism for this type of collaboration? So within the Ulysseus project, we have the seed funding as a financial tool, which is a small incentive. But of course, the idea of these calls is not to be a one-time thing, but to really foster, I would say, strong collaborations and sustainable collaborations also in future. And of course, the advantage is that these COILs take place in existing courses. So these are not extracurricular that teachers basically do on top of their workload, but this is, of course, should be curricular, should be recognized, should be within your course. Of course, as we know, especially when you develop the COIL and change sort of the modality and methodology, you will have an additional workload also in planning and organizing. But maybe Zena, I may also ask you, what was your core motivation, or what was your, let's say, intrinsic motivation also, to do this COIL, to also to go into the 3rd edition now? Is it, because you see the added value for the students, or, are there purely financial, mechanisms triggering you?
Oh, well, yeah, it's true. I just said thanks to Guillaume for raising the more economic side of it. I'm not in the economic side of it. I'm in the pedagogical side of it. And from a pedagogical point of view, it's fantastic. And I think for me, the fact that we're now going into the 3rd edition and trying to expand it, hopefully also to all of our students in the 3rd year, not just selected groups, it shows how rewarding it is, not just for the students, but also for me. I've been the only teacher involved in it from this side, but I really hope to get other teachers involved. There is a problem with time. I mean, I'm very enthusiastic about it, but from it, there is a time commitment to it, which is more than if you were not doing it. It has to be said. But it is from a pedagogical point of view, it ticks so many boxes and it can be used in so many different ways. For me personally, it all stemmed from my kind of research from my master's degree, and it's heading into more research. So that's my personal interest.
Thank you so much, Senna. I think that was a very nice closing also. And I would like to thank everyone who participated in the webinar. I know that we are a bit over time, but there were a lot of interesting questions. And thank you for staying over time, Senna. And also, I want to really say a big thank you to our colleagues from the Université Côte d'Azur, to all the colleagues participating in organizing this webinar, and also Shandan and Zena for presenting. And I hope we get many seed funding applications. And please, as I said, don't be shy. Feel free to reach out to the mobility officers. We will share the presentation and the contacts, of course, afterwards. So thank you, and looking forward to interesting projects in that case. Then have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.